next level grit, next level grind. Tune in, come and watch next level shine. Military science, next level tech, no telling how deep the next level get. Next level grit, it's next level's time. Next level K9s, putting in that grind. Texas finest, blessed by the highest. Like and subscribe, next level going live.
Yeah, so after that happened, they told me that he had the mass burst on his spleen. They said that, hey, they came in, and this is where, I'm going to highlight Project Canine here. They came in and said, hey, if you want, this is going to be emergency surgery. They worked up a quote, and they said, hey, this is going to be anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000. So, obviously for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. So I remember at the time vividly, I called Jay up and he said, Chris, we got Tambo 100%, whatever he needs. And Steve, that was it. That was the gist of the conversation. And imagine just taking that factor out alone of the finances now, where I can just focus on the medical, was a lifesaver. So I didn't even have to think about it.
Today we sit down with federal police officer Chris Bingham, and we focus our conversation on his retired dog canine Tambo. Now Tambo unfortunately is suffering from hemangiosarcoma, which is often called the silent killer. It's a type of cancer that usually, if left undetected and untreated, will be a death sentence for your dog. As devastating as this is, Chris and Tambo have utilized this opportunity to be an inspiration to millions of people. His story is amazing. The things that Canine Tambo not only has done in his career, but in retirement is just as impressive. His battle with cancer is inspiring not just people with dogs, but with people battling that same type of cancer and going through chemo. So without further ado, please help me welcome Chris Bingham and Canine Tambo. Was there a specific sign that you knew, my boy is never acting like this, there's something's off?
Yeah. I mean, and obviously as handlers, we all know our dogs, and when something's off, he usually comes and greets me at the door every day. And, I didn't see that. And when I saw him just kind of laying there looking at me, and he had that look in his eyes of panic, I knew something was off, because these dogs are usually so stoic, and he had that look of panic in his eyes. So, I knew something was off. Obviously you checked the gums were pale, and lethargic, was pretty wobbly on his feet. So, you just know at that point that something was going on. So, time was of the essence to get him and let them figure out from there what exactly it was.
So it was pretty obvious to you then. You saw a distinct difference in your dog, just medically and just his overall, his day-to-day, his character, what's normal for him.
Yeah, Tambo is a very, even in retirement at 11 years old, is a very energetic dog. So he's constant. When I come home, he's excited to see me. So he's running at the door. He's picking up his monster dog toy and running around with the house, showing it off, and he's ready to roll outside and and play in the yard or whatever. And that wasn't the case that day. So I knew it. I knew something was off. And then these dogs, when we work them long enough, and Steve, you see it in their eyes, man. The eyes tell a story. Not only with humans, but absolutely with dogs as well. And you can kind of read your dog and know that something wasn't right.
So Chris, we're going to go back to Tambo because it's important. There's so much to be taught and learned about in reference to what he's going through. But before we move on, tell us a little bit about your background in canine. You're still on the job, so we have to be mindful and respectful of security clearance and stuff like that. But what can you tell us about your history when it comes to dogs?
Yeah, so been in law enforcement for going on 23 years now. 17 of those years have been spent in canine. I've been lucky enough to retire 3 dogs. Tambo was my third. The other 2 first one was named Rex. He was a dual purpose Malinois, and then I had I guess you call it Malaherd, a Shepherd Mal mix. Tina, my second dog. They've both since passed away, and then so spent a good portion as a handler, and then my last 7 years on the unit, I spent as the canine commander, managing a pretty large, busy, high functioning unit.
So, what kind of dog was Tina and Rex as far as the disciplines they were in? Were they bombs, or bomb dog, narcotics, or what kind of dogs?
Yeah, so Rex, my first dog, was a dual purpose patrol explosive, and then Tina was single purpose explosive detection, and then Tambo was single purpose explosive detection. So
So, you were telling me kind of offline that when Rex and Tina retired, they also had some medical issues. Tell us about that and what ended up happening.
yeah, so Rex retired in 2010. I took a job out in or an assignment out in Hawaii for a little bit, so he got to live the good life on the beaches for a while. I found out he loved the ocean. I thought he was gonna sink like a rock when he got in the ocean, but I found out he loved to swim after we got there. And then Tina hated the beach, so it was kind of funny. But so Rex retired in 2010, and then Tina retired in 2013, and then both of them within a year of each other after retiring. Well, Tina after retiring, both of them got cancer within a year of each other, and then passed away both from bladder cancer. So
Bladder cancer. So, I don't know much about it, Chris, and I know that must have sucked to have to deal with that with both of the dogs. Do we have any idea what causes that? Is it purely just genetics?
I think it was genetics that happened. It just kind of came out of nowhere, and you start to see signs of with the dogs just acting differently, struggling to go to the bathroom. And then, you kind of go through the gamut of tests and stuff with the vet, which obviously gets pretty pricey. And at the time, living in Hawaii, which was, expensive enough, going through all that with both of them within a year of each other, and trying for with hospital stays and treatments and all that kind of stuff, it got pretty pricey.
So, you were you responsible financially for both dogs after they retired, and then did they get treatment for their cancer?
No, Rex was pretty far along in his. So with his, by the time we kind of discovered that we wanted him to be comfortable. So we kind of put him on some meds to be comfortable and kind of live out the rest of his life. And he told me when it was time, and then Tina kind of the same thing. But both within hospital stays. I mean, I would say between both, it was probably about $10,000 in medical expenses that we paid, and I wasn't making the money that I'm making now, so it was a little bit of a it was definitely a financial burden to do it. And as I've told other people, and I was telling you, Steve, before we came online, I don't think any handler should ever have to be in a position to make a decision on their dog based on finances, especially after they've given their all to their to their country and to their departments and to their cities.
We certainly don't deserve these dogs and their selflessness and everything they provide us. They provide us, they're not just our partners, they're our best friends often. They're the most reliable person in our lives often. They don't have real bad days. They don't talk back to us. They do all these things that is just some of them is just unmeasurable. It's the intangibles that the dogs give us and add so much value to our lives. It's tough. And there'll be some people that listen to this that are obviously in the canine realm and they know how it works. But for the average civilian, is it common that when a dog retires that you're responsible for all the medical needs? And is there any other avenues in which these medical bills could get paid?
Yeah, so to no fault of any of the departments, they do what they can for these dogs, I know, my department does, they do everything they can for these dogs while they're working. They just, after it's time for for them to retire, and they do what they can, that burden, falls directly on the handler. And, back in 2013 and 2014, I know we're about to talk about Project Canine Hero, but there wasn't a Project Canine Hero back then, for these dogs to go into these programs, and that cost, would constantly fall on the handler for everything. The simplest thing, the vaccinations, keeping up with that, routine vet visits, and then you talk about younger dogs and pets. I recommend anybody getting pet insurance on their dogs, but for the working dog, it's nobody's going to insure them after they retire, so that's out the window. So that's not even an option. So that cost is solely on that handler after that.
So you mentioned, Chris, Project Canine Hero. You and I both know Jason Johnson from Project Canine Hero. He's a friend of ours. Tell us the importance of Project Canine Hero and how it's played a role in your current dog, Tambo.
Yeah, I tell Jay all the time that they've saved Tambo's life twice. When Tambo had to retire a little bit early due to a torn ligament, and we decided at the time at work not to do the surgery, that he was going to be stable enough in retirement to be okay. But workability wise, it probably wouldn't have been good for him to continue working. But shortly after he retired, he was outside running and tore both of his ACLs. And what I found out with dogs, what I didn't know, when one ACL goes, the other one's prone to tear as well. So when that happened, Tambo's mobility just went downhill very quickly. He was having a hard time getting around, was uncomfortable getting up, sitting down. And I had met Jay, Jason Johnson, a couple years earlier at the HITS conference in DC, and we just kind of stayed in contact. And Jay had helped one of our other dogs on the unit that had leukemia prior to that. So Jay got Tambo, right into the program. We got him over there. He got the TPLO surgery, which was about $7,000, and paid for all the rehab. And I remember it was a pretty lengthy rehab getting his mobility back. But I remember that moment being back in the yard, and Tambo back to his normal self running, and I remember calling Jay. It's like, hey man, bro, you brought my boy back to life, because it's with these dogs, and we were talking about this earlier, Steve, is the mind is always still there, but when the body breaks down, that's tough for these dogs, because they live to work. So it was just an awesome thing to see him, be able to get this surgery, get his mobility back, and then kind of just bring him back to life. So that was the first time.
So you man, to tear both ACLs, is that what you said?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever heard that happening at one time for a dog. Do you know what he was doing? Like, what that was? He chasing a squirrel or something? Like, what happened?
Ironically, it was a rabbit. So
of course.
So he's prey driven, like a lot of these dogs, and we're prone to get a lot of the rabbits in our yard, and he took off after one of them, and jumped off the top step, and then when he came in, he was limping pretty badly on his back hindquarters, and then remember taking him in, and I was shocked to hear that both of them had torn. But ironically, we had another dog on our unit a couple years ago. Same thing happened, and I didn't know that was a thing with dogs, that when one goes, the other one's kind of prone to tear as well. So interesting fact.
That's crazy. So after all that, they retire him, right?
Yep. Well, he retired before that, because he was jumping in the back of a tractor trailer and misjudged it, tore the ligament, and then retired. And then shortly after retirement, that's when he tore both of his ACLs. So he had a rough go going into retirement. So
Well, he's still having a rough go right now. Tell us about
yeah.
currently how Tambo's doing, what he's dealing with.
Yeah, so he Tambo was doing amazing after Jay, got him the TPLO surgery. One of the things is I like to give back to Project K9 Hero for everything they did for Tambo. So, we were doing a lot of events with Project K9 Hero. Tambo kind of became one of the ambassadors for the program. We, did the Baltimore Orioles game, and on Tambo's 11th birthday, we got to do the salute to service game for the Philadelphia Phillies, representing Project K9 Hero. And then, ironically, I would say it was not too long after that. That was in May. In July, normal morning, I came down, and Tambo's a creature of habit. So even though he's retired, I still keep the same routine with him in the morning. So I get up at 4, I come down at 5, I fed him. He was enthusiastic to eat. I was out the door by about 5:15. Came home about 2:30 that day. Normally, Tambo greets me at the door. That wasn't the case that day, so I was like, "Well, that's weird," and kind of went into the dining room, and he was just kind of laying there. And as I was telling you off air, he kind of had that look in his eyes, and as we work our dogs over the course of their career, we know when something's off, and they give us those looks. And he was giving me that look like, Dad, I'm not feeling well. Something's wrong. And he wasn't getting up. He was very lethargic. Obviously, the first thing I did was check his gums. His gums were very pale. Um, Got him up. He could stand, but he was a little wobbly. So I knew something was off. So the first thing I did is there was an emergency vet about 20 minutes from the house. So I got him loaded in the car, and then took him over to the vet, and they took him back and did an ultrasound, and then they came back and told me that he had a mass that was on his spleen that burst, and it's kind of like a blood mass. So when that blood mass bursts, the abdomen quickly starts filling with blood. So um, time is of the essence at that point to get the dog in there,
Sure.
because if I would say, Steve, if I came home maybe an hour or two later, it would have been too late. So
That's
it was just lucky that by the grace of God, I left work a little early that day. So
that's crazy, man. Um, I know how much you love Tambo and how much you've been through with him, and it's been really cool to see his journey afterwards. He's been highlighted in so many different ways, and his story has been told in so many different ways. What advice would you give to a handler who may see that something is off with their dog? Because often we go through handler school, and it's very minimum time we spend on the health of the dog and the things
mhm.
about the dog's health that we should be aware of. What are some of the tips that you can give some of maybe our new handlers to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I mean, the simple thing, I mean, the first and simple thing is knowing your dog, right? And having that bond with your dog, and knowing when something's off. And I mean, these dogs can't speak, so a lot of our communication with them is reading their body language, seeing their body language, knowing that that's something off, seeing that lethargia. And the simple things like checking their gums, are their gums pale? Taking their temperature. Those are all the basic things that handlers should be learning, coming out before they get their dog, how to do a basic health check on their dog. And what we would always tell our handlers is, you don't have to be veterinarians, but you should be able to do the basic checks on your dog, like, for example, bloat, checking to see if the stomach is distended. Are they trying to throw up and retching, and nothing's coming up? Like, when, if they ingest something, being able to give your dog peroxide for something. Those are like the simple things that we can do, and the basic things, and to keep the dog stable, and get them to the vet so they can kind of do their thing.
Yeah, that's all good advice. Obviously, that's good stuff. I wish that I would have learned more about the medical aspect because it's There's just so many dangers, man. Things like snake bites. Here in Texas, we deal with quite often, and we've had a couple of dogs die from venomous snake bites. Just
Yeah.
like little things like that isn't super important. Knowing your dog's like core temperature and making sure that you understand, because even like humans, some of us run a little hotter than normal. Dogs do the same, and getting like a core understanding where your dog's temperature is really important. Where is Tambo at currently right now? Because I know it's kind of changing, and he's been through a lot. But tell us more about that.
Yeah, so after that happened, they told me that he had the mass burst on his spleen. They said that, hey, they came in, and this is where, I'm going to highlight Project Canine here. They came in and said, hey, if you want, this is going to be emergency surgery. They worked up a quote, and they said, hey, this is going to be anywhere from six to $9,000. So, obviously for a lot of people that's a lot of money. So I remember at the time vividly, I called Jay up and he said, Chris, we got Tambo 100%, whatever he needs. And Steve, that was it. That was the gist of the conversation. And imagine just taking that factor out alone of the finances now, where I can just focus on the medical, was a lifesaver. So I didn't even have to think about it, and that's all Jay said. And he said, go take care of your dog, and whatever he needs, we got it. So that right there was amazing. So I told them to go. Let's go through with the surgery. So the surgery involved removing the spleen. So they said that, hey, we're going to do the surgery. He may not make it through. So they said they would call me with an update. So I remember about an hour later, they called me and said, hey, look, we got him on the table. He's opened up. His spleen is covered in masses, and from what we're feeling, we think this is also, spread to the liver, and we're, obviously we have to biopsy, but we're pretty sure it's cancer. And at the time, it's almost like they're like, what do you want to do? And it's almost like I think a lot of people at that moment either would say, hey, if you think it's cancer, I don't want to put my dog through anything else. But I just felt like with Tambo and everything that he's been through, and just the feeling that I had, that I wanted to continue with the removal of the spleen and see where we're at. So they did that, and he made it through surgery. It was a rough couple of days, but he made it through surgery like the warrior he is, and the next step from there was getting an appointment with the oncologist.
Did they say that he also had a mass on his liver, because they suspected liver issues as well, right?
Yeah. So when they did, and I'll share the picture of his spleen with you, so you can kind of get an
Sure.
idea of how many masses were on there. But so they removed the spleen, biopsied the spleen, and they felt the liver. So they said, hey, what we're feeling is like his liver's covered in masses. So they were already kind of self-diagnosing him, and in my opinion, almost telling me, hey, he may not going to make it very long. At the time, they were giving me a prognosis of 18 days to a month. So I got an appointment with the oncologist at Blue Pearl in Malvern, PA. Oncologist came in, sat down with me and said, "Look, Chris, we're going to take him back. We're going to do an ultrasound on the liver, but if, as suspected, this cancer is on the liver, chemotherapy is not going to do much for him." And she said the other thing you got to think about is with the type of cancer is hemangiosarcoma, which they call it the silent killer in dogs, and these blood masses fill on the spleen and the liver, and they said that if it is on the liver, even if just keep them comfortable, the risk that you run, Steve, is one of these. They could be acting fine, but once one of these masses burst again, you're back into that emergency situation again, and obviously that time you're not going to be able to remove the liver. So then you're the dog just is not going to make it. You're looking at euthanasia at that point with the dog. So I remember sitting there. They took him back for the ultrasound, and it seemed like the longest 30 minutes of my life. But she came back in, and I remember trying to read her face to see what she was going to tell me, and I was expecting the worst. And you know what? She told me that they're not seeing any signs of any cancer on the liver, which was the best news possible. So at that point, he was a candidate for chemotherapy. So we actually started it that day, and he's now done a total of 3 sessions.
So for those who have not gone through this process of chemotherapy, and I knock on wood that someone never has to go through that. But what does that look like? What's the prep look like? What's the actual treatment look like? And what does it look like after the fact?
Yeah, it's done intravenously. He goes. They want to do a total of 5 sessions, so they're doing it once every 2 weeks. So they take him back. They prep him. They put the IV in. It takes about an hour. I will say when he first comes out, he's still acting fine. By day 2 or 3 is kind of when the nausea starts kicking in, and that's the rough part that we go through. That for about 2 or 3 days he doesn't want to eat. I gotta do what I can to get his medicine in him. So I've been using a combination of anti-nausea medicine, Serenia, and then an appetite stimulant to kind of get his appetite going. But once we get through those 2 or 3 days of nausea, he kind of starts to turn the corner and gets his appetite back. So we've been doing okay. This last appointment was a big one because before the chemo session, they did an ultrasound of the liver just to make sure, since this is a very aggressive cancer, just to make sure there was no changes to the liver. And she came back and said all his blood work panels look good, and there's still no signs of cancer on the liver. So, man, he's already defying the odds, bro. Like they were giving him, like I said, 18 days to a month, and and this was in July. So he's already defying the odds, and I know if anybody can, beat this for as long as possible, it's Tambo.
You said that the specific type of cancer he had was hemangiosarcoma. Is that right?
Yeah, and they call it the silent killer in dogs because these masses will form on the spleen, and unless you're doing, nobody really does, preventative ultrasounds for no reason usually, unless something is wrong. So when that happens, these masses form, and as I started reading more up on this cancer, Steve, and getting educated more, people started reaching out to me, telling me, "Hey, my dog had the same thing, but he had this mass burst, but I didn't get home in time, and he didn't make it," or it was too far gone. Getting time is of the essence, and I kind of knew. And the one thing I'll say about the health checks too, it's so important after the dogs retire because we have the requirements as handlers to get that routine blood work done, but you still need to keep up with that when the dogs retire because it's funny because I had my routine checkup a couple weeks prior, and some of his liver panels were off. So my primary vet had planned to do an ultrasound a week after all this happened. So it would have been discovered at some point, just because I'm very thorough with my dogs and they get their checks and everything. But one point I do want to say for the retired handlers, it's still important to keep up with all the blood work and getting those checks done because there's some telltale signs that sometimes will pop up.
So I always knew that blood work was important. Was there a specific panel that you recommend? And then I guess would it be safe to say that you would recommend ultrasounds because is that the only way you're going to know that this issue on the spleen is happening?
Yeah, I mean, so a basic CBC is running it, and that the red blood cell count, the white blood cell count, just looking at the kidney function, the liver function, and all that stuff. When those numbers are off, it's kind of a telltale sign. And the other thing is he had also lost about 7 pounds. Now, he picked up he picked up a little bit of, I think all the dogs pick up a little bit of weight in retirement, like kind of like we do when we retire as well. But he had lost a little bit of weight, so I knew that something wasn't right. I didn't think it was that. But yeah, just a basic CBC is very telltale. And then if some numbers are off, like the liver and stuff like that, a lot of times if you have a proactive vet, they can do an ultrasound and or imaging and stuff like that. So there's a lot of options out there that vets can do, but it's very important to stay proactive and even just keeping up with the urine and fecal samples as well. The heartworm, testing and all that kind of stuff. And I give my dog Dasequin just for joint stuff. So I try to, it's like a professional athlete. You got to keep the body strong and with supplements and to keep them going, especially as they get older.
So, as far as Tambo's concerned today, how many treatments has he had, and what does the future look like for him, as far as you know?
Yeah, so he's had three treatments. We go for number four this upcoming Thursday. We're going to do five treatments, and then intravenously, and then the plan will be go to an oral chemo after that, and the hope is he'll be on that for several weeks, and then the hope is from there that we can keep this cancer at bay for as long as possible. The diagnosis now that my oncologist has given me is anywhere from 6 months to a year. However, uh, people have reached out to me and said, "Hey, my dog had the same thing. They gave him 3 months to live, and he's now it's been a year." And that's very encouraging to me. And as I was telling a friend of mine the other day, is people can give us expiration dates. They can put numbers on things, and they can tell us how long we're going to live, or this diagnosis is going to take you out or whatever. But you can't you can't put something on resiliency and the spirit of an animal or a human. And I think you keep them strong and you keep the mind strong, and you have a positive attitude as well. And I think that's one of the big keys, Steve, is also the handler needs to be positive for the dog. It's just kind of like working them, in detection work, right? You got to have a positive attitude, and the dog feeds off your energy. I was I was telling somebody else the other day about I'll bring up the when we were out at the World and Police Fire Games, and we were out there, and I was judging the vehicles, and we talked about it. We had a lot of handlers, come through, and when they were searching the vehicles, they were changing up the way they searched, and the dog knew it, and the dog knew something was off with the handler. So then the dog started acting quirky. So I kind of correlate that too with the energy at home when they're sick. Is we need to maintain that positive energy for them, because for them, they don't know what's going on. And if we're being Debbie Downer, or don't have that positive energy toward them anymore, I think that puts a shorter expiration on things as well.
Do you find that to be hard to do, Chris? Like you lost two dogs to cancer already, and here you are faced again with the C word again. And do you have doubts? I mean, as a human, I would
Yeah.
expect it, but maybe not. I mean, what's your mental like at this moment?
Well, one of the things is, when these things happen, and it happened with Tambo, is I getting through that initial surgery and giving him a chance. And the one thing that this has given me, Steve, with him is time, and you can't put a price on that. And I don't care if it's 2 weeks, 6 months, but whenever something happens or we lose a loved one, the first thing we all think about, right, is like, oh man, I wish I would have spent more time with them. I wish I would have told them how I felt. So for me now, at first I had some guilt after this started happening. I'm like, all the mornings that, I'm rushing out to work and he just wanted to hang out for a little bit. And it's like, I'll do something with him when I get home. I'll take him out for a walk or a ride or whatever. So now I really, it's enabled me to kind of live in the present more and really just savor the time that I have with him. And man, it's been an adventure. I'm a pretty private guy, but one of the things that I did decide to do is kind of document this journey on social media and Instagram with Tambo with his cancer diagnosis, and still getting the word out about his story and what these silent heroes go through, and what they face, and then the programs, and highlighting the programs like Project Canine Heroes. So I'm trying to use this small platform that I have to kind of be the voice for the voiceless, if you'd say.
Yeah, sure, man. And you've been a lot of places. I commend you for bringing so much attention to this. I mean, look, he's your partner. He's your boy. He's been so much to you. I think it's the right thing to do to not worry about how private you are, but bring attention to something that's really important, because you always have the potential to affect guys like me who's running a dog right now, to maybe find something, God forbid, something were to happen to my dog Bear. Like I now know I'm equipped with better tools to figure out if something is wrong, and that alone I commend you for. Not to mention that he deserves to get recognition for all the work he has. So I'm gonna ask you two things. Number one, how important is it for you to educate people about this specific cancer? And number two, is it therapeutic for you through this process to kind of see how everything is unfolding?
Yeah, it's been, I'll answer the second part first. It's been very therapeutic for me to kind of be able to besides the gym, just being able to talk about it and talk about his story, and kind of highlight him. We just got honored by the Baltimore Orioles last week. They brought us up in the left field perch in the bottom of the third inning, and highlighted Tambo for the work he's done with Project Canine Hero, and the fight that he's going through, which was a huge honor. And so I want to continue while Tambo's still feeling okay, to have him be that ambassador and that voice, and to show that the resiliency of these dogs is simply amazing. And they're so stoic, and often they don't show pain, but the one thing with Tambo is he wants to live. He wants to, and he's enjoying every moment, every moment that he has. So it's very therapeutic for me. And then also just being able to get the word out that maybe can help other handlers. And the other thing too, and this is a small thing, we talk about orthopedic things, is we went to some classes and stuff. We used to do a lot of them on the unit, and they had a doctor come in and said, these dogs are like, professional athletes. My unit that I worked on, we do a lot of detection searches. So you look at, the football players when they go out there, what's the first thing they do before the game is they warm up, right? And it's the same thing with the dogs, is we should be stretching them out, warming them up. If we're going to be doing a lot of searches, or you're going to be doing patrol work, is that's how you avoid a lot of these orthopedic injuries. Because think about it right now, if you just went outside your house and just went into a full-on sprint, the possibility of pulling something, would be maybe pretty significant. And it's the same thing, for the dogs. And the big thing too, Steve, that I want to highlight is just being proactive. It's kind of like with police work, right? You don't want to take a reactive approach to things. You want to be proactive, and it's the same thing with your dog's health. When you're proactive with things, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to catch these things, hopefully in a timely manner, or before they fester into something else, or to give your dog a fighting chance with what's going on. And if you're, and what I'll say too in these emergency situations, if you're in doubt, because I remember, when I was the commander of the unit, handlers would call me, and that's like, if you're in doubt, then take the dog in. Don't waste the time in calling, your supervisor, the training sergeant or whoever first. Call them on the way to the vet. I'd rather you get them into the vet first, and if you're questioning if something's wrong, then kind of waiting around and see how they're going to react later.
There's just so much to go over with Tambo. I mean, I'm going to stay there for a minute. So, is there any statistics you can give us about how proactive Tambo was during his time, and kind of give him the credit that is obviously due to him and all the things that he's done?
Yeah, and the first thing I want to do is I want to, I can't really talk about where I work, but I want to highlight, the unit that I work for. We have some of the hardest working handlers out there, and the sheer volume of detection sweeps that we do is second to none. And when I talk about the numbers that Tambo did, it's these other handlers are doing just the same, and sometimes if not more. But he's searched in the thousands. Numerous calls for service. We did the 2017 presidential inauguration. We've done a lot of VIP events, for government officials and stuff like that. Things I can't get into too much, but a lot of high profile events, and yeah, just a lot of sheer volume of calls, which after a while it takes a toll on the body. But these dogs that we have, they're tireless workers, and we look for specific dogs that can fulfill the mission that we do. So we have a pretty amazing unit.
Yeah, so they bust their butt for us, and they do all these things. And then multiple times during this podcast, you mentioned Project Canine Hero, and those in the industry know Jason Johnson well, and his obviously being synonymous with Project Canine Hero. But for those who may not know, talk to us about Project Canine Hero and the importance of its mission and how it's affected you.
Yeah, I mean, so you're well aware of the mission, but Project Canine Hero, they take care of retired police and military working dogs with significant medical needs. Jason Johnson, the founder. I mean, I know you've had Jay on the podcast before. He probably told you the story. He started the nonprofit with $500 in his pocket, and it took that vision of Jay to kind of get this started and build it up to what it is today. But
also the longest intro of any podcast that I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, so I got to touch on that real quick. I remember, before you and I met, Steve, I was watching Jay on the podcast, and I've known Jay for a while, and he has a pretty lengthy resume. So I was like, all right, I'm going to fast forward to see when Steve gets a next question, and I think we went into 22 minutes.
In Jay's defense, he's got quite in his defense, he's got quite the background, and I think that was like the shortened version, So if you had an opportunity to buy Jay a drink and he tells you everything he has, it's definitely longer than 22 minutes. But yeah. Continue. Sorry, bro.
No. So where are we at? I lost my train of thought on that one.
Tell us about Project Canine Hero and its mission and what it does and how it's affected you.
Yeah, so I mean, if you go on their Instagram or their website and you see the stories of all the different dogs. So you have dogs that have had cancer. You've had dogs that were hit by another car, been stabbed, been shot. I mean, there's all these different heroic stories and stuff that these dogs have been through, and then you see what Project Canine Hero has done for these dogs to restore them back to health. That not putting that financial burden on these handlers that are already going through a traumatic thing of whether whether they, their dog had cancer, their dog was shot, their dog was stabbed, their dog was, hitting their cruiser. I mean, so they're already going through enough, and Jay just simply taking the financial part out of it. And I think Jay does it right. He brings in a certain amount each year, and dogs that really have a need, and he wants to make sure that there's no, money is not an option there. Whatever the dogs need, that he's able to provide that. And like I said, I feel I told him, when we talked, a month ago, as I said, man, I don't know how to ever repay you because you saved Tambo's life twice. And then the biggest thing I told him, Steve, I said, Jay, man, you've given me the biggest thing that nobody could give me is time. And that time I have with my dog now is everything to me. And again, whether it's, he's with me a couple more months, or I'm hoping it's a year or 2 years, and he continues to defy the odds. But I'm making the most of it, and Project Canine here has been able to give that to me. And I know the long-term goal of Jay and some of his partners is to get a bill passed eventually to get these dogs the care that they need in retirement.
Jay does a lot of just traveling and spreading the word across the nation about that. He's been to Capitol Hill multiple times. To your point, trying to pass legislation to really get government officials aware of how important this mission is to take care of the canines who are taking care of us. And in essence, millions of people and their security is really affected by these dogs' ability to work at a high level. And most people have no idea that they even exist, or the work that goes behind them, or the dedication that the handler has to have, and the relationship. It's just so much to that. And with Jason's very, very, very long background, you know that he understands that better than anybody. He gets the mission because he's lived the mission. And he was at the point, and if anybody wants to know a little bit more about Jason, you can go to that podcast, where he was the guy responsible for saying yes or no as far as things taken care of financially in the military at one point. And then he recognized there was a need there. And instead of just saying, yeah, there's a need there, he moved his feet, he moved forward and said, I can do something here. And guys like you now are able to reap the benefits. And of course, Tambo. And it's sad that it wasn't around during Tina's life or Rex's life. But I'm sure we're not the only ones who have been affected in a positive way. I'm sure there's hundreds of other people who would sing the praises of Project Canine Hero. And I'm wearing the sweatshirt.
There you go. They've been a lifesaver, and it's been amazing. And again, taking that financial burden and that cost away, where I can just focus on his medical needs. And one thing I want to touch on, Steve, that emergency surgery, I think that final bill was about $7,000, and then each chemo session that I go for is $700, and then I have to get blood work in between those weeks. That runs a couple of hundred. And Jay just did a post on Project Canine Hero and said between Tambo's TPLO surgery, his hospital stay, emergency surgery, and now his chemo, they've now invested $15,000 into his care since he's retired.
That's crazy, and it's not even that hard to get to that number, which is scary.
No.
But I'm sure, like you said it a bunch of times, and I don't want to reiterate the same points, but it really must be satisfying to know that all your responsibility should be is to take care of Tambo and be there for him, and to treat him like a regular dog and love on him like you normally would, and try to keep things as normal as possible. Because we mentioned, like, they're absolutely very aware of our emotional, the way we are, whether we're happy, whether we're upset. And if they feel like something is wrong, you actually may be making it worse.
Yes.
Has that been difficult for you to stay positive during this whole process?
Yeah, 100%. I try to, on the way home from work, I have a little bit of a drive coming from the DC area back to Baltimore, and I just try to get my head straight. So when I come back in the house, I'm positive for him. But the one thing, I wanted to touch on is we think about these dogs, and we call them these silent heroes, but they're really our partners and our best friends. So think about you as a handler and any other handler out there, the times that we were just kind of going through it, whether you're going through a divorce, a loss of a loved one, a sick child, or whatever, just something that work stress that hits you hard in life. Those silent ride home in the car, those times you're just sitting on the couch at home drinking a beer, and your partner's right there, and just their presence, it's kind of like that security blanket, right? It's that calming presence that they give to you. And I remember going in before his surgery, because they told me he was really anxious, and I was telling someone else, when I went back there before they did his emergency surgery, he had this panic look in his eyes, and it was just me kind of going up to him. And now I almost felt like it was my turn to give that back to him. And instantly I remained calm for him, because I was pretty emotional, but I could see the calm come over him. And I was like, man, this is what it's time for me to be there for him. And now is the time for me to be there for him, because for 7 years for us working, and in retirement, he's been there for me. He's been that stoic, steady force, that security blanket. And that's what a lot of people outside of us that are handlers and work dogs is, yeah, you can bond with the pet, but some people, unless you're a handler, you're never truly going to understand that bond that we have with these dogs.
Man, yeah, you said it so eloquently. It's tough to put into words, man. It really is. And I've tried multiple times, and sometimes I do better than other times when I speak to the general public about what it means to have a dog, and all the facets that go into that relationship between training and just home life, certification, deployments, and everything in between, the ups, the downs, the medical stuff, the stuff that the handler's going through personal that the dog inadvertently often helps with. It's hard. It's hard to put into words everything they mean to us. It's interesting. I just take a little sidestep with you. You mentioned before that you were a judge for the police and fire games, the World Police and Fire Games this year in Birmingham. That's where you and I met, and I got to hear your story for the first time. Tell us about that. That whole experience at the World Police and Fire Games, and kind of like what it was like for you to judge, and maybe a little bit more about some of the contestants.
Yeah, it was an awesome experience just to get out there and go down there with the team, and Jason asked me to go down there and judge, and to meet so many different people. That like you said, that's where you and I met, and I think between the canine biathlon and then the detection, we had teams from Germany, Brazil, all over the world, and to meet these different teams, and to see how they work their dogs and the bonds they have with their dogs, and then to see them compete was pretty cool. I mean, it was, and then just all the other events that were going on in the area. It was a once in a lifetime opportunity to go down and do that. And it's funny, we were talking about how much these dogs feed off of us, and I set up the vehicles, and some of the teams that came out there, the first thing with detection, what do we tell the dog is if the dog's willing to leave it, you got to trust your dog, leave it. I'd rather them leave something than continue to go back and then cause a queuing issue, and then have your dog false sit or something along those lines. But you could see it with the handlers, and with some of them, is that's not how they would normally search. And I think for a lot of them, they were getting into that competitive mode maybe for the first time, and doing a competition. So you would see them, they'd clear the vehicle, the dog searched it pretty good, and then instead of heading to that next vehicle, now all of a sudden they're going around that vehicle 2 or 3 other times, And now the dog is like, okay, mom or dad's acting a little weird. And Steve, in detection for the dog, it's the game, because all they're looking for is to get to that point, that stimulus response, and to get to that reward. And whether it's food or that toy, that's what they're looking for. So if they think dad's acting different, oh, he must want me to sit, I'm going to sit down there. So, we had, a lot of the handlers were causing their dogs to false sit on a lot of these venues. And I remember talking to them afterwards, and I said, I know that's not how you normally search. And they're like, no, I was nervous. And I was like, well, you got to understand the dog's feeding off you, and you normally search a certain way. So, and that's how you're so in tune with that dog, is that everything goes down the end of the lead, right? Everything. So you got to kind of treat it the same. There was one guy that actually went in and smoked all the vehicles. I'm trying to remember what his name was. He might have a gold medal sitting over there somewhere. Right?
I don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about this little thing right here?
Yeah, right there.
I just happen to have it. And really, the one I should be showing is this one, which is Bear's medal, because he's the one who deserves the credit. But thanks, man. I mean, let's go back to advice that you would give somebody, because this is the first time I've ever competed. I've never been a huge fan of competing. But I will say that both of my mentors who I had on the podcast, Bob Suarez and Paul Curtis, both competed in the police world and fire games. And that's what motivated me to do it this past year in Birmingham. But what advice would you give somebody both in competition and then in real deployments? After all your experience, what kind of wisdom can you give somebody?
So a lot of my experience and success has come from making mistakes. And I'll go back to when I first started. I was a young guy in my 20s. I got on our unit pretty quickly, and we talked about things running down the end of the lead. I was going through a bad breakup with a girl at the time, and my head wasn't right. And I remember we went into our yearly certifications, and those certifications aren't set up to fail anybody. It's just to simply show that the dog recognizes the odor. Well, I let it get to my head, and I failed the certifications miserably. And I remember the canine commander at the time, who ended up becoming my mentor, bringing me in and said, look dude, like, when you come to work, and I was telling somebody else, an officer, this the other day that was going through something, is you gotta, whether it's doing something like that, you gotta have an imaginary, especially in law enforcement. He said an imaginary trash can. So whatever you're the crap you're dealing with at home, you got to leave that shit at home, especially even as any police officers, but especially if you're working a dog, right? You got to just clear your head. And the biggest advice that that's one of the biggest things. But the other thing is it's a simple thing, but trust your dog. Like, how many countless other times have you, and especially on deployments, if you're going, we do obviously have explosive detection dogs. So, you don't want to be wrong if your dog sits on something, because, you're talking to the difference between narcotics is now you're just searching a vehicle, or now you're calling in an EOD team, right? So that can give you the pucker factor when you're going out on bomb threats. But trust your dog, trust the training process, and know that if that dog is willing to leave it and you've searched it, then be confident in that. It's the dogs know what they're doing. It's us as handlers, and I'm sorry if I'm cussing on your podcast, but it's us as handlers that fuck the dogs up, right? Mm-hmm. So you just trust your dog, enjoy the process, and don't overthink it. And that, when you start overthinking things, that's where you start, causing the problems in the dog, and overthinking things, and it's easy. It's easy it's easy for a dog to pick up a bad habit very, very quickly, but it's sometimes harder to break that. So you really just got to be on point with that, and just kind of clear your head and trust the dog.
I love it. Chris, I'm going to ask you a question that I haven't asked every person that I've hosted on the podcast, but I think it's important to ask, and I wish that I could remember asking this every single time. But if you can go back in time to the first time you picked up a leash, what advice would you give yourself at that time?
Is that I realized very quickly on that I was very, very hard on myself early on with the dog, because one thing, I would tell the new handlers as the canine unit commander is this is a very humbling profession, right? You're gonna have days where you look like a rock star, whether you're doing the patrol work or detection work, and then other days where you're just totally gonna shit the bed, and you gotta be able to bounce back from that quickly. And it was younger. They used to call me when I first started Quiet Riot because they could see that I was quiet on the outside, but I was processing everything in my head and overthinking everything. So,
Quiet Riot. That's such a
yeah,
good name.
yeah.
That's so good. I'm changing your number. It's no longer Chris Bingham. It's Quiet Riot.
There you go. But getting out of your own head and giving yourself some grace and knowing that you're going to have good days and bad days, right? The dogs are going to have good days and bad days. There's going to be some days where the dog is just like, yeah, I'm not doing this, or is going to be an ass. But that happens. But you got to give yourself some grace and know that this is humbling, and get out of your own head. And you got to have a short memory, right? Because if you have a bad day, you got to be able to bounce back. And if you start overthinking things, especially when you're working a dog, you're not going to be successful.
Amen to that, bro. Well, as we're wrapping it up, Chris, one of the things I'm probably known for saying over and over again is, these dogs give us so much, and before you know it, you're there during their last breaths. And I always have regrets about, and it's happened to every single one of my dogs, about things that I could have done better with them, things that I could have been more patient about, things that could have had them experience. I always have some type of regret, during that time. And I really beat myself over the head over it. But if you could speak to Tambo and he could actually understand exactly word for word what you're saying, and who knows, maybe he can, what's the message you would like to give him right now? If you had an opportunity to speak to him and know that he understood every word that you're saying, what's your message to Tambo?
Is that thank you for being by my side, and you've been there for me, and now it's my turn to be there for you, and as we've done in the past. And that's the beautiful thing about working a dog, and that bond, is that you're not in it alone, man. You're with that partner every day, and you're doing it together. So if he's sick, then I'm dealing with it just as much. We've been in this together since we started, and now this is a different fight, right? And what I did tell him, and I just did a recent news interview where they came and filmed at the house with WMAR in Baltimore. Is I told Tambo we're going on one last adventure together, right? And this is the big one, right? And this is the final one, and we're gonna make the most of it, and I'm gonna make sure that his story is heard, and I'm gonna make sure that his career doesn't go unnoticed, and that the value that he had and the impact that he had doesn't go unnoticed, and it's going to be heard, and that we're going to make the most of every moment we have left with each other. And then I know when this is all said and done, and his time comes, I'll be able to look back on this and say, man, this was a wild ride toward the end. We really maximized everything, because I still plan on I've been doing some podcasts. I've had 2 news interviews. I just did an article for K9 Magazine on his story. We just had the thing with the Orioles, and I'm going to continue to get his story out there. And I think the coolest thing, Steve, is, man, now there's people reaching out to me on Instagram, people that are going through cancer and going through chemotherapy, and saying, hey, well, your dog is inspiring me. Tambo is inspiring me, like his resilience and his fight and his will to live. And that's amazing to me, that he's now having this impact on us as humans that are going through cancer as well. And that's powerful. That's powerful.
Amen to that. Only God could create such an amazing companion for us. They're truly our man's best friend. Chris, thank you for taking the time to
man.
give us information, to tell us about your special boy. We love him. We love you. We appreciate everything you're doing. And maybe one day when you're retired, we can do a part 2 and get a little bit more specific about what you do. But until then, I'll be looking forward to that. It's going to be really cool. But shout out to Jason Johnson. Shout out to Dr. Erica O'Donnell, who was with us during the World Police and Fire Games. Who did such a good job of taking care of our dogs. It was an aspect of the World Games that I didn't know was there, but it makes a lot of sense. But she made sure that all our dogs were capable to compete, and then check them afterwards to make sure they were in good hands. And this episode is kind of based on, we spent a lot of time on the medical aspect, and I think it's important to wrap that in there. Like, know your vets, appreciate your vets, because a lot of times they're the thing that is going to keep your dog alive and well for a long time if you communicate with them about everything that's going on.
Yeah, is being proactive. And I know, like, we had our vets come out, 2 times a year and did classes for the handler, just to kind of do refreshers and stuff. And that stuff is just really important, just being proactive with that.
Right on. Chris, thanks again, brother. I cannot wait to do this again. Please keep us in just kind of updated. If we wanted to follow the story of Tambo, what's his Instagram handle, and how do we get into contact with you if you have maybe any questions about what's happening?
Yeah, you can follow him on Instagram. Like I said, I've been kind of documenting his journey. It's the lowercase k, the number 9 _ and then Tambo, Tambo, and you can kind of follow his journey from there. And if you got any questions for me, if your dog's going through the same thing, or you just want to reach out, I'm pretty responsive on there. You can just DM me on there. So be more than happy to chat.
Awesome. So K9 _ Tambo on Instagram. Yep. If anybody listening to this feels led to help out, I know that there are opportunities for them to donate some money. Isn't that true? Is it through Project K9 Hero or through other means?
Yeah. So Project K9 Hero, we had a fundraiser up for a while, which we raised a few $1,000s on there. Jason's got a link on his page where you can donate directly to Tambo's care. And then our friends from Houndbound Brewing, they're doing a fundraiser for Tambo right now, where they're selling merchandise where 10% of the proceeds will go to Tambo's care. And then once I get that, I'm giving that right back to Project K9 Hero toward Tambo's care. But they actually just launched Tambo's own shirt line over there at Houndbound Brewing. So the Tambo Strong shirts are out. I think they're only going to be out a couple more days. So if you go over to Houndbound Brewing, give them a follow on Instagram and grab yourself a shirt.
Sounds amazing. And if you want to get in touch with Project K9 Hero, I believe it's project9hero.org. Look for the opportunity to donate if you feel led. And Chris, thanks again. Much love to you, brother. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it, bro.
Next level grit, next level grind. Tune in, come and watch next level shine. Military science, next level tech. No telling how deep the next level get. Next level grit, it's next level's time. Next level K9's putting in that grind. Texas finest, blessed by the highest. Like and subscribe, next level going live.